Hi everyone, it's Mr. Rust here. I just wanted to make a quick video to help you better understand how to read and make sense of Module 3, Lesson 1 about the American Revolution. Our textbook has a lot of interesting ways that it tries to help you better understand and remember the information. And I'm going to show you how the textbook is written in a way that is designed to make it easy for you to find the right information and to take notes. So feel free to stop this at any time, make note of it in your own Google Doc or in your notebook, and go through it again and again if you like. You can even use this video as a review guide for you preparing for your next test. So the textbook is organized with essential questions, and these are really important for you to put into your notes and for you to remember. Here's the essential question for Module 3. How is the American Revolution revolutionary? Now, that use of the word revolutionary means that we have to try to understand what it means and then compare what we think the revolution is with what the definition of the word revolutionary is itself. So how is it revolutionary or unlike anything that had ever come before, which is really the definition of revolutionary? Make sure you write the essential question in your notes and be able to explain it in your own words when you're preparing for your test. The textbook has a series of timelines at the beginning. Timelines are very important for you to understand the context in which we're looking at things. So from 1759 to 1784 is what we'll look at here, and that actually goes up till the end of the American Revolution. And it begins when King George III becomes King of Britain, and then a series of taxes known as the Stamp Act, the Townshend Act, and others are passed. And then we start to see reactions from the colonists, the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, etc. And then we start to see actions taken on a collective basis like the Continental Congress, and then the ultimate outbreak of war with the battle at Saratoga being the turning point of the revolution, and then the war ending with the Treaty of Paris in 1783. So when we get into Lesson 1, Stirrings of Rebellion, it's important for us to see how the textbook is laying out the most important information for us to know. And it's usually here in the sidebar, the big idea. Now this is something you're going to want to write into your notes because the textbook is putting it in big red letters for us, and a big idea is one that you want to be able to know for yourself and to be able to explain using examples from the text. If you can do that, then you probably understand what you read. And the big idea for Lesson 1 is that the conflict between Great Britain and the American colonies grew over issues of taxation, representation, and liberty. So you're going to want to find examples of issues around taxation, examples around representation, and examples around liberty. Now, why it matters now is ultimately very important because that's kind of why we are studying this. The American Revolution is an event that shaped humanity's fight for freedom, not just America's, but humanity. And that makes it a much bigger deal. It's not just about one country or one people. It's about all the people of the world and all of humanity, because the American Revolution wasn't just about a region. It was about an idea. And that idea is one that all people can share in. It's also essential for you to understand key terms and people. And so here's a list of key terms that you're going to want to write in your notes and to be able to define for yourself. Making a list of flashcards of vocabulary terms is my biggest recommendation. I strongly recommend that you make vocabulary flashcards starting now and continuing throughout the semester. They'll be your best study guide to review for tests, the midterm exam, and the final. If you start today, you will thank me when you get to your final exam because it will be a piece of cake and you will get an A. But you have to start today. Now, the story of the American Revolution begins with Crispus Attucks, and here is Crispus Attucks right here. Why does it begin with an African American? Because he was the first person to die fighting for the revolution, and he died at something called the Boston Massacre. And that's important because this event and his death rallied the American colonists to start to want to break away in larger numbers. So Crispus Attucks is a significant turning point. He's kind of like the George Floyd of the 18th century. Now, in this section, you see how the textbook has laid it out for you with different headings. And these are headings you're going to want to put into your notes. The colonies were organized to resist Britain is the first one. And you would want to be able to explain how the colonies organized to resist Britain, as well as why they organized to resist Britain. In your notes, you're going to want to have a subheading called the Stamp Act and the Stamp Act protests. The textbook has highlighted for you these terms because they're essential for you to know. And if you can explain what the Stamp Act was and the Stamp Act protests, then you have a good understanding of these events. And you can use that to explain the importance of why the Americans rebelled. Now remember, when we go back to the very beginning, it's a conflict that grew out of taxation, representation, and liberty. So ask yourself, is the Stamp Act an example of taxation? Is it an example of representation? Or is it an example of a struggle for liberty? And being able to organize your understanding of every section in those three terms, taxation, representation, and liberty, can help you make sense of the information itself. Now, the Townshend Acts are defined here. The Townshend Acts, like the Stamp Act, are a series of taxes. And so you would want to organize these under your taxation section in your notes. And these taxes were on imported materials like glass, lead, paint, and paper. So that identifies them. But really, it's the reaction to them that we also want to understand. The reaction is right here. They reacted with rage and well-organized resistance. So we're starting to see a pattern here. With the Stamp Act, they organized the Stamp Act protest. With the Townshend Acts, they organized more organized resistance, which led to riots in which they actually laid hands on police and customs agents and attacked them. Now, one other thing I want you to pay close attention to as you read are these questions in the margin. The reading checks. These are your best friends for reviewing to make sure you understand the material. As you read and take notes, you should be able to look at your notes and answer these questions without diving back into the text. That's a good way for you to test whether the notes you've taken really have any value. If you can't answer the reading check questions using your notes, then your notes aren't very good. You really want to test your notes by doing the reading checks. And when you go back to study for your test, make the reading checks your review sheet. Another section here is entitled Tensions Mount in the Colonies. So you're going to want to find out why tensions are mounting and how tensions are mounting. And obviously, an example of tensions mounting in the colonies was the Boston Massacre. And here again is our friend Crispus Attucks mentioned here. This is going to be a very big event, which is detailed more here in this section. Now, I want you to pay close attention whenever you see these special squares, these breakout blocks in the text, because this is where the textbook often puts key questions they take and put on the test. So they realize, the textbook writers realize that students don't read these sections. And that's why for their tests, they put some of the most important information in here. And also, there are some really important questions here that you could answer. Based upon this picture, what can you say about the redcoats? So definitely take some time to challenge your understanding and deepen your awareness of what this event was all about by reading these extra sections, even though they're outside of the regular narrative. Now, what the effect of the Boston Massacre was is right here. It was the creation of the committees of correspondence so that they could then send letters to all the colonies about what was going on in Boston. And this is the beginning of the organized resistance. And the organized resistance begins to take shape with the first real riot known as the Boston Tea Party. And the Boston Tea Party was when a group of patriot rebels disguised themselves as Native Americans and threw tea into Boston Harbor. This crime, this rioting, this looting became known as the Boston Tea Party, and it led to another action and reaction by the king known as the Intolerable Acts. And the Intolerable Acts should be a section in your notes as well. So if you're starting to see what I'm talking about, there's an action and a reaction going back and forth. And each time the other side takes it up one more notch. And this time with the Intolerable Acts, you're going to see that the king is going to impose martial law on Boston. And this is going to lead to a lot of very upset people. The next reaction to the Intolerable Acts is the fighting that erupts at Lexington and Concord. Now, along the way, notice here is another reading check. What did King George set out to achieve when he disciplined Massachusetts? Well, you'll find the answer isn't far away. It's going to be right here in, let's see, when he punishes them, he wants to, let's see, what does it say? He wanted to punish the rebellious colonists. So that is important because it's no longer about doing what's right for the king and the kingdom. It's about revenge, and that doesn't have any moral value to it. At this point, the king is off and he is starting to treat the colonists as an enemy. And once you start to treat your fellow citizens as enemies, it's not too far before you have a war. And that war is going to break out at places like Concord and Lexington. The Battle of Lexington and Concord, which you can see here in this painting of it, wasn't really a battle as much as it was a skirmish between the redcoats and the colonists. The battle makes it look like it's much more organized than it really was. It wasn't actually an organized fight, and the British ran away because the Americans were basically using guerrilla warfare. But this leads to the famous ride of Paul Revere right here, where Paul Revere, a member of the Sons of Liberty, rides out and warns the Minutemen that the British are coming. Now, let me point out right here, this chart for you guys, very important chart. You want to summarize the action and the reaction of each side. Notice here is the British action, and here are the colonial reactions. And knowing that it's sort of an action and reaction, a back and forth, is one way to better understand and make sense of this information. So you definitely need to study that chart. Now, the Ride of Paul Revere is important because it becomes sort of an example of how the Americans are already ready to fight and prepared to push back. So the question, what did Warren order Paul Revere to do? Well, that will be found back here on this page right here. He told him to warn Adams and Hancock, as well as the townspeople along the way, that the British were coming. So he's warning the other leaders of the American Revolution. Now, the last thing in this section is, of course, a sort of an assessment, and you want to use this as a way to test your notes and your own understanding of what you just read. If you can organize the information in number 1, if you can define the key terms and people in number 2, and if you can answer the questions 3, 4, and 5, you probably have a pretty good understanding of what this chapter is all about. These are also good things to use as you study for your test. So I hope this video has been helpful. I want to keep it short so that you can make use of this and then get down to work on taking your own notes. So I hope it has been helpful, and I wish you the best of luck.